Oh, he's putting it on there. Excellent. Okay. So we have Mitch Korman on, a lawyer in Toronto, who is going to help guide us through this wonderful time.
Isn't it a great time? It's like, what was the saying that doesn't kill me makes me stronger? Which
Exactly. Or
I guess is
this
more
too
true today
will
than it was
pass.
a few weeks ago.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I can tell you that, first of all, can everybody hear me okay? Because I can't really hear myself. Something's wrong with my microphone. So everything's muffled for me. I hope it's not muffled for you.
Can hear you, Mitch.
Let's start.
Yep, we're good.
We're good.
We're good.
Okay, excellent. Where did my gallery view go? Let's start with what's going on out there. So I'm in contact. First of all, I've got 10 lawyers in my office, and all the lawyers in my office are closing deals. They were closing them for the last 2 weeks. They're still closing them this week, and we anticipate we're going to be closing them right through April. Now we've got a huge backlog of deals to work on, thanks to you guys. You know, all the deals that you wrote up in February and March are still have to be closed, and it's business as usual for us, except in a whole different regime. Everything takes a little bit longer, but the deals are closing, and we haven't had a single deal yet that hasn't closed for any reason, let alone for a COVID-19 reason. So that's all great. I've also been in contact with a number of other lawyers out there, busy lawyers like us, and their experiences have been exactly the same. Despite all the turmoil that is existing in our marketplace, they are, you know, they're prepared. You know, we started going out and buying laptops for all of our staff a couple weeks ago, and they're at home, they're using them, and so are all the other law firms that do real estate deals in quantity. So we're not having any problems with that. The challenges are, some of the law firms are not quite as equipped as we are. There are a lot of old school lawyers out there practicing real estate, and they are having much more challenges than we are with remote signings and wiring funds and things of that nature. Those are they're legal issues. There's things that will impact you guys, but we as lawyers and as busy lawyers in the marketplace and many other firms are helping out our colleagues as much as we can to make sure that the other side of the deal gets done too. So I've told all of the lawyers in my office, you know, if we've got a lawyer on the other side that isn't quite as up to date with technology or is having challenges, do the paperwork for them. Teach them how to wire funds. Like do whatever it takes to get the deal done. So one of the main messages I have to you guys as realtors is you have to do the same thing for your colleagues. Help them out wherever you can, because it's your industry. So if you want your industry to run as smoothly as it possibly can under the circumstances, you really have to help out your colleagues, and you know, and not, you know, just say, oh, this is my chance, I'm going to take advantage here. Really do the best job you can with helping your colleagues out. So the big challenges. The biggest challenge I still see is financing. Everything has slowed down. Lenders take longer to work because half of their staff are not in the office, and the other half, well, nobody's in the office, and half of them are not working, and the other half are working virtually, and that takes more time and slows down the whole process. So the issues that we're having when we're getting down to deals possibly not closing or getting delayed, they're usually relating to financing issues, because you know the underwriters come back and they say we want proof of X, Y, and Z, or maybe let's say they did a credit check and they see that they have another property listed on their credit bureau. Then they'll send us an email saying we want proof that they don't own that property. Then we have to do a search, and then we have to get the information back to them, and we're all working remotely, and the mortgage broker's working remotely, and everybody's on shorter staff. It just takes a lot longer to do anything. So, you know, 3 weeks ago, when a mortgage approval could be done in a day or two, now it might be taking a week. And you have to prepare your clients for that, and tell your clients that if they're asked to do anything, you know, when they're going through the underwriting process, or even if they've been approved, and the mortgage broker or the bank comes back with a question, tell them that they have to answer those questions as fast as they possibly can. Otherwise, they run the risk of holding things up, because there's a chain. It goes, once the underwriting finishes, then it goes to us. And then if there's another problem, then it goes back to underwriting and back and forth, and everything takes time and gets slowed down in the process. Another thing, in this marketplace, people are very quick to say, oh, I just got fired. Telling people you got fired is not a good idea. It's essentially a layoff, because if you're a good employee and you had a good job and right now they can't afford to pay you, that doesn't mean they're firing you. It just means they can't afford to pay you at this moment in time. And chances are you're going to have your job back once we get through this pandemic, and which my personal opinion is 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that. But I'm not a health person, but that's just my personal view on it. So the worst thing the client can do is, we're going to do a virtual signing with them, and they say, oh, I just lost my job. That puts us in a really precarious situation, because we are acting for the bank as well. So lawyers and mortgage brokers are acting for the bank as well as for the client. So they should be careful to what they say, and they should actually just keep quiet about that aspect of their life if something's changed that way, because they don't want to ruin their own deal just by making a statement that might even be sensationalized, by just saying, oh, I lost my job. Well, you probably didn't lose your job. The restaurant's closed for a few weeks and then you'll have your job back. It's very, very different. But if they just say, I lost my job, lawyers and mortgage brokers have an obligation to tell the bank. So your clients need to be aware of that. Other things that that don't affect your world as much as our world in things slowing down is, when you think about what we have to do is, 3 weeks ago, we were delivering checks to pay out mortgages to every different bank branch in the city. Now, all of a sudden, some banks will allow us, fortunately, up to 3 weeks ago, none of the big banks would allow us to wire funds to them to pay out a mortgage, which is mind-boggling and absurd that a bank wouldn't allow you to wire funds. They wanted physical checks to be delivered to the bank. Anyway, now some banks will allow it, some banks won't. Some banks still want physical checks delivered. Some banks want them certified and then delivered, so that causes us to have staff, which we don't have, running around to certify checks and deliver them. Things like that just completely slow down our system also in our ability to close deals. And everything that slows things down makes our customer service ability that much worse for your clients and for you. So we're trying to work through these things as best we can, but I'm just letting you know that when you're talking to your clients, and your own expectations of us as lawyers and the expectations that the clients have to change a little bit, because under the circumstances, we're all doing the best we can, and it's just a little tougher to do business. It's kind of like having an assembly line, and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden, you're told to do something different, and there's a learning curve. It takes a while to get used to it. But now with that assembly line, we're told we have to do 5 different things for 5 different lenders, and where we used to do everything the same way, and it's really challenging. And the rules change. So yesterday, First National wanted certified checks, and today they said they'll accept a wire from us, which is hallelujah. It's great, but it changes day to day with all these banks, and that's also very challenging. One good thing that I should let you know for you guys is that we, like our firm, is wiring your commissions, same day service. And so, I'm making sure that agents get paid as fast as we possibly can do it. And I'm encouraging other law firms that aren't up to date with the wiring, same way we're trying to get them on board with wiring funds from lawyer to lawyer, we're also trying to get them to wire funds to agents, because that's what you guys would like. And the faster you get money, the faster you get paid. Any questions yet? I see one from Carol.
Hi, Mitch. Thank you so much for taking this time to do that. So I've got a large commercial deal that was set to close on March 30th. The buyer is a restaurant owner. He has obviously been very, very hard hit in this last month. He's had to close his restaurant completely. And although he has the cash to close. He's worried about cash flow. And so he has asked the seller for an extension of 2 months. The seller initially said no, and then came back to us early this week and said they're willing to entertain an extension. But it's the position of my buyer's lawyer that if the seller refuses to make an accommodation, that it will look unfavorable to him later on, to just draw a line in the sand. You know, if this ever gets to a point where there's like, you know, arbitration, or there's a lawsuit relating to the release of deposit or further exposure to liability for my client, it will look unfavorable to the seller if he chose to not to try and accommodate a request for a longer closing. Do you have thoughts on that? And I realize it's specific to, you know, every deal and every lawyer, but I'm just wondering if you anticipate that, you know, a buyer's petition that they have mitigating circumstances, maybe not related to income, but anything, health related, anything, will at a later date be a usable defense for failing to close or asking for a delay in closing?
Very good question. The law itself is time is of the essence. So time is of the essence means deals have to close when they're scheduled to close. Having said that, if you're, you know, if I were a judge, I would be sympathetic to the situation at hand. And if there was a legitimate reason why a person couldn't close and the seller was being unreasonable, I would try to find whatever I could to find in favor of that buyer that is suffering some hardship. And, you know, it might be something completely unrelated to what, you know, the reasons why they can't close. So, you know, if it was before a judge and a judge says, well, time is of the essence, so the deal had to close, but now I see that there was some issue with title, so they, you know, they'll look for another reason why they could find in favor of the buyer. And, you know, that's basically what would happen. But to get to that point, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in lawsuits and 2 years of time. Nobody wants that. So I think that there is always a negotiable settlement in these circumstances. And in your circumstance, I think the best thing you can do is try to delay the closing. I've got a similar commercial deal on the go right now where it's clients are buying a series of apartment buildings, and their financing is just bogged down. Like, the financing that's being done at the banks is, the priority is the home deals. The commercial deals seem to be, everybody that was working on commercial deals seems to just be working on house deals because that's more important for the economy right now. And commercial deals usually do have extensions to closings and things of that nature. So the deal that I've got, the seller just saying, no, we expect to close on March 31 or March 30th, and that's it. And, you know, so what we went back to is we said, look, we sent them a letter from the bank saying why the bank can't process, is taking a lot of time to process. So we can prove to them that it is taking time. We gave them an option. We said, look, we can do a vendor take back if you want. We will give us similar terms to what the bank's doing. Give us a short-term vendor take back for 6 months. We'll close with you, and we'll use our best efforts to get our financing in place as soon as possible. Or extend the deal for 2 months and let us work out our problem with, you know, let the pandemic run its course and then give the bank time to do it. So we gave them lots of different options, and I'm waiting to hear back of which one they're going to take. But, you know, as long as you can show that you're doing whatever you can, I think a judge will be very sympathetic to your client's cause. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Okay.
Mitch, I've got a question about signing electronically.
Yes.
So at this point, you're able to handle everything electronically. There's no concern over people having to come into an office. Everything's good. And if we see a further shutdown, will things still be able to close electronically?
The answer is no, it's not all electronic at this point in time. Unfortunately, there are a few lenders that are still requiring wet signatures. there's three levels of signature. There's like the wet signature, which is they want an original document that's signed.
Okay.
Then there's the electronic, then there's a wet signature that's been electronically transmission. So some of the lenders are insisting on a wet one. So they want us to have original documents. Others will allow us to have a client sign it and then scan it to us with an electronic signature, which is great, which is way easier for us. And then some of them will allow us to do DocuSign, essentially, which is like a real electronic signature.
Yeah.
Those are very, very few. Most of the lenders still want a real signature. But there are the odd one that want a wet signature. And that's very troubling. And when we have that, like our office is closed to the general public. However, if we have to meet a client in those circumstances, the clients are coming to our office and meeting in our office. Yesterday, we had 3 of them during the whole day out of, I don't know, probably 30 signings that we did yesterday. So the odd time client's going to have to come in. The good news is, out of all of this, we've actually been able to sign up many clients that have not been able to get back to Canada remotely, which is amazing because we never used to be able to do that. And fortunately, the banks that those clients are with, the most recent one we did was RBC, where the client was stuck in Japan or Hong Kong. I can't remember where it was. And RBC said, you know, we know this client and you know this client, and we're fine with you signing them up via Skype or whatever. And it worked out really, really well. So that's good. But don't tell all your clients, oh, you can just sign remotely, it's fine. Because the odd client will be with the odd lender, you know, it might be a home trust or equitable trust, or, you know, typically it's like some of the B lenders or the monoline lenders that don't allow it. So they might have to come in.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on. Okay, so let's talk about changes in the agreement of purchase and sale, like clauses. So as I'm sure most of you know, I did publish a whole bunch of clauses to be used in a pandemic, and it's interesting the feedback that I got from them. The reason why I created these clauses is because there was another law firm who shall remain nameless, who created other clauses that said the deal must close under any circumstance, come hell or high water, doesn't matter what happens, you have to close your deal. And I don't believe in that. I believe in looking at the circumstances and trying to have deals closed as orderly as possible under the circumstances that we're in. So the clauses that I created were really created for anything post March 13th. Anything that you draft, that you have, any deals you have on the go before March 13th are fine with the old agreements. So one thing that I didn't make clear when I posted clauses is that the clauses are not intended to reopen agreements that you've already done. Those deals will all close barring some catastrophe. And if there is a catastrophe, we'll figure out a way to delay them and accommodate people as best we can, because that's what we have to do in this marketplace. It's for the deals that you're working on right now. If people, and they're not intended to be, oh, you must put in a COVID-19 clause in every deal you do. You don't need to put in a clause at all if you don't want to. The reason I did the clauses are for the circumstance where the client is insisting, like the clients are worried and what's going to happen if this and what's going to happen if that. And if the clients are really worried, then you can use these clauses to give them more comfort so that they'll know that if they're in, you know, God forbid they're in a hospital, they're not going to be forced to close until they get out of the hospital. Things of that nature. So that's why those clauses were created, and there have been many others that people have been posting since then, and they're all good. It's intended to give you the tools to be able to do your deals in the current regime that we're in. Any comments on that, or has anybody had any issues with using the clauses? Nobody's putting up their hand. Okay, that's good. So one of the things that has come up from, I've been doing a lot of these webinars, the fact that you are the keeper of your industry. And in these times, we have to be really respectful of the fact that yes, you've been named an essential service like we are. That doesn't mean it's business as usual. You have to be so cautious out there. I've seen that Keller Williams actually is leading the forefront in drafting acknowledgements for clients to sign and for people to sign when they're going into open houses, not open houses, into viewing houses on, and I think those were great. And if nothing else, they're not really, the waivers of liability and things like that are secondary. The important part is reminding everybody of the health issues, reminding them to ask the questions of, are they sick and have they traveled and things like that, just to keep everybody safe and to show the rest of the world, all the clients out there, that you're doing the best you can under the circumstances. And I think that that it's great that KW came out with these forms.
I just wanted to say something, Mitch. It's Jamie Lee. I don't know if Jeff is on this call, but he needs a huge shout out right now. He's our broker of record that jumped in for us, and he actually created that disclaimer. And then Sean Provenchier, another broker that runs a sub brokerage with us, sent that to me right away. And so I want to thank those two guys, because it is so important that we're keeping our people informed, our clients, our agents, and just doing our best to protect the health of people. That's the most important right now.
I think so too. They're great, those forms. And I've had other brokers from other brokerages asking me if they should use those forms too. And I said, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing, it's not proprietary. It's just good common sense. And sorry, who was it that drafted that?
So Sean Provenchier sent me something that he saw, and then Jeff created our disclaimer for both of our brokerages, Keller Williams Advantage and Experience, as well as our whole P&G manual.
Okay.
Some of your advice and some of another lawyer's advice on clauses to put in the agreement. So it was just a rapid pace collaboration, and it was really well done. So thank you guys for the support.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay. Any questions about anything so far?
We have a quick question.
We got one.
Cheryl does.
We have two questions. Some of what you answered to Carol is probably good for this as well. We had a client purchase a farm and we didn't make it. They have to sell their house in order to close. And however, like everything happening right now, they were supposed to be on the market. However, we've pushed it off. We have time. If their farm doesn't close till June, I was just wondering if we should get ahead of it and contact the lawyers now in case there is any extensions needed or anything like that. And then second question is about tenants. We have a tenant who is American, can't cross the border, and landlord's not being helpful at all and pushing off a month or anything like that. And I wanted to know if there was any rights at all that our tenant had.
Okay. First question is, you've got time. Did you say you have till June?
Yeah.
For the purchase?
Yeah.
So you do have lots of time, and deals are closing out there. I'm seeing new deals are coming into the office every single day. Not the same pace as they were 2 weeks ago, but they still are happening. And it's not, the whole industry has not shut down. So I think that you should be patient. I don't think you should necessarily warn the other side at this point in time. I would certainly wait until, May 1st. Let's say that you've got lots of time.
Awesome.
But if you get to a point where you're the best judge of the marketplace, if you really feel that your clients aren't going to be able to sell within that time frame, then come May 1st or the first 10 days of May or whatever, that's when I would reach out to the other side and inquire about the potential of extending the closing date. And who knows, if the house is vacant, they might have no issue. If they're not selling to buy, they might not have any issue. And the extension might cost a little money. They might say, okay, we'll extend, but we want you to pay all the expenses of our extension. That's okay. It's not, nobody's going to lose a deposit, and that's a reasonable solution.
Okay.
With your landlord and tenant issue, remember that tenants have all the strength out there right now. So my suggestion, this is the second time I've answered that question in 2 days. It's exact same situation. Somebody is out of the country and can't get back. Don't try to, if a landlord right off the bat says, no, we're not going to give you any abatement of rent, my suggestion would be if they still want to rent the place, when they get to Canada, have them move in. And once they're in, that's when all of their power begins as a tenant. They have to be in possession, because once they're in possession, there's a lot of things that landlords all of a sudden lose all their strength. So once they're in possession, that's when they should revisit an abatement of rent. And that's when they might want to make an application to the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal. And basically, all they would do is submit an application to the tribunal saying that they want an abatement of rent for this reason, because it was impossible to fulfill the rental agreement because of COVID-19. And nobody wants to go to the tribunal, least of all the landlord. That will encourage the landlord to give back some money. And it might not be all the money. You might end up at half of the money during that time that the place was vacant, but you'll get somewhere. You're not going to get $0, because the landlord knows if they end up going to that tribunal and they get a sympathetic tribunal, which is usually what you have at the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal, there's a good chance they're going to lose. So, it's not like a regular court of law. So that's how I would handle it. But don't bother with doing anything at this point until the tenant is actually in the unit, because that's when their power starts.
It's actually a Toronto Blue Jay player, so it's all dependent on if the MLB even starts.
Yeah.
So we'll have to be careful, because obviously he might still need the place. I'm not playing hardball yet, but
You may not even need it if it's canceled.
No, but so that's a different situation. If he doesn't need it, he can just not pay.
Right.
We
just
told
lose his
him.
first and last, right?
Yeah, he'll lose his first and last. That's big
That's
deal.
what we advised this morning to the financial planner. It's exactly what we said. Just sit tight.
Yeah,
Cool.
and if it's a Blue Jay, he can afford it. It's like
Well, that's they this morning were like, he's a young kid and he doesn't make a lot of money. I'm like, I saw he makes $600,000 a year.
no, it's actually more than that. I think the starting salary is 800.
Oh,
we got it.
You've seen his pay stubs, the contract.
Really?
If anyone cares.
Okay, and don't forget that those pay stubs are in US dollars.
Absolutely.
So it's 30% more. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. Any other questions out there? Oh, this is good. No other questions. We can get back to our kids. Yeah, Carol. Carol, unmute your mic.
Thank you. What was my question now? Just with pre-construction and the rescission period, are you seeing any grace on those deals that are still happening? I've got Megan actually Megan Clark is dealing with one of ours, and I just find the lag time between the builder answering questions is significantly increased, which is understandable. But is it still like a hard timeline on that rescission period if it's not timely in terms of getting stuff back and forth?
I would say no, it's not a hard timeline on the rescission period, especially since builders don't have the same lineup of buyers that they did 3 weeks ago. So builders, as soon as markets change, builders become way more receptive and way more accommodating. So Megan hasn't told me of any instances where she hasn't been able to get an extension to the timeline, particularly if the builder hasn't responded. It's presumed that the timeline, the 10 days will extend. So I don't anticipate having any issues with that with builders. What I am seeing with builders is that every day we're getting another notice from a different project saying that they're exercising a COVID-19 delay, basically. So people that thought they were going to be moving into their units over the next 2 months, chances are they'll be moving in a few months later. So I would just let your clients know that there's been a lot of slowdown in the construction world, even though it doesn't seem like it when you watch the news. Last night the news was all about how construction workers are being forced to keep working, and they're all working on all these high-rise projects. But you don't see the real effect is that I think there's a lot of people that are just not showing up for work because of the situation that we're in. They're just choosing not to, which is totally fine. So I think that you'll see construction projects, especially occupancies and final closings, will all be delayed because of this.
Do you have any thought that that builders are in a position to be able to potentially cancel a project if they invoking a COVID clause?
I'm referring to buildings that are already built, ones that are the possession, occupancy dates, and final closing dates are imminent.
No shuttle
New projects.
pre-sale.
Sorry.
no shovel in the ground yet. Do you anticipate that we might see something where some of these projects are shelved, not necessarily due to lack of saleability, but as builders do from time to time, maybe because they want to reposition the condo at a different price point or something like that? Do you think it's likely projects where they don't have shovels in the ground yet that we'll see cancellations of those projects for under the guise of COVID-19, whether that's the actual reason or not?
I think that what you'll see is the projects that were launched 3 weeks ago that, maybe they had a launch and they sold 40% of the units right off the bat or 50% of the units right off the bat, but they have to get to 80% to be able to get their financing and to get the project off the ground. Those are the ones that are going to be delayed. And if this lasts a long time, then those ones might get canceled. If it doesn't, and if it's a short-lived pandemic that we're going through, and if things get back to relative, we're going to go through a couple months of recession as well following the pandemic. So, a lot of things will happen, and it all depends on the capitalization of the builder and the viability of the project. But the most recent ones are the ones that are most likely to get hurt, not the ones that were sold, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. It all depends on, if the project was sold out or sold up to 80% and they had their financing was in place, then those projects will still go ahead. It's the ones that are more in the gray area that may have problems. But I don't think that anybody in this marketplace, a builder, is going to use the COVID thing just to get out of a deal where they think that they've sold their project out at a too low a price point. So I'm talking about the project that was sold a year ago at $1,000 a foot, and now the marketplace is at $1,200 a foot. Well, guess what? In 3 weeks' time from now, it might be back at $1,000 a foot. So I don't think any builders are going to scuttle their deals because of that, because we're in really unknown territory right now. I don't see any other hands up.
There's a question on the chat here from Sue. If my seller clients are working with a different buying agent in another city, how can I help them if their buyer agent is not up to speed on all of these clauses?
Okay. You can help them by sending them the clauses, but again, you may not need the clauses. The clauses are only if you have clients that are insisting on clauses that will cover you for what if this and what if that. If you don't have any clauses, which is like all the deals that were done prior to March 13th, there were no clauses. If the land registry system gets shut down, the deals close when it gets reopened. If the banks shut down, then deals get done when banks reopen. It was the same thing that we went through with the ice storm and when we went through with the blackout. The world will still continue on with or without the clauses. The very rare case, someone might say, oh, I'm not closing now because the closing was supposed to take place on this date and it didn't. That's really, really rare. By and large, people do close, if they're forced to close a day or two later or a week or two later or a month later, the history has shown us that the deals still end up closing. So I hope that answered the question. Let's see what else. My buddy at Slate's delaying new projects. Yep, I would agree with that statement. Are there any other questions in the chat? I don't see anything here.
I have a question.
Yep.
Hello. Do you advise any clauses? I've seen a lot floating around for agreement of purchase and sales, but just for tenants, like I found new tenants today. Is there anything I should add in? I looked through provincial lease. It's pretty straightforward.
No, for a tenant, there's nothing to be added in.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, yeah, the leases are what they are. There's no other provisions that you need. The thing that I should point out for tenants though is the lease essentially starts once they get possession of the unit, and there's challenges with getting possession right now because for some reason there are a number of buildings in the city that are not allowing moving in or out during the pandemic. So that is challenging now. So my suggestion is speak to the property manager that you're dealing with and find out if they're allowing tenants to move in, and if they're allowing tenants to book the elevator. And if they're not, then go back to the landlord and say, look, I want this lease to start from the day that the tenants can move in, not from the day that I'm handed the keys.
So would you recommend adding a clause that says the tenants agree to connect with the property management directly to facilitate their move?
Well, they have to anyway.
Yeah. But
So
kind of
you might want to put a clause in that says that the rent paid by the tenant will commence on the later of handing over the keys, or the date, the first earliest date that the tenant is able to, that the building allows the tenant to move into the building.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. I hear you typing.
I'll write it down.
Okay, anything else? Okay, well, I've covered what I wanted to cover. Because if there's no other questions, then we can wrap it up. I would like to tell you that the market is going, because I get calls and emails all day long about clauses, about what do I do in this circumstance, what do I do in that circumstance. And this tells me that people are out there and they're buying and they're selling, and it's just taking them a little bit longer and it's a little bit more challenging. But do the best you possibly can for your clients. And if a client is worried about the situation that they're in, let them sit down and relax for a few weeks, and then you know they'll still be your client, and they're not going to be upset that they didn't jump on an opportunity in this marketplace. Like the worst thing we can have out there is panic and pandemonium. If everybody stays cool, we'll all get through this, and the market will be great, and we'll go through a little bit of a dip in the economy. That'll be fine. It will bounce right back, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you
Okay,
very
and
much for being on, Mitch.
Thanks,
And remember, if you do have a problem, call me or email me, and not just me, any of the lawyers in my office. We're here to help you. So if you have real problems, not just what if, but if you have a real problem, get us and let us help you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate you
Thank
being
you so
on.
much for your time.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thanks.